Welcome into the Locked On Knicks podcast. Could the New York Knicks have their full lineup back sooner than you think?
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast. I want to remind you that today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. And I wanted to thank you for making Locked On Knicks your first listen today and every day, because we are now on all platforms. So if you want to join the ranks of being an everydayer, you can do so by subscribing on YouTube and hitting that notifications bell. Or if you're on the go, be sure to hit that auto download function on your podcast app of choice. But who's talking to you? I'm Gavin Schall, a longtime play-by-play broadcaster who's been covering the NBA around a decade ago, including once upon a time as a credentialed media member covering the Phoenix Suns. But today, I am covering the best team in the NBA, in my heart anyways, your New York Knicks, and handing out some injury updates. So the big question of the day, can the New York Knicks be whole by the end of the season? Could they be whole even a little bit before then? Well, we got a cacophony of injury updates that we are going to roll through at yesterday's practice from Fred Katz, from Ian Begley, from Chris Winfield. The first one, Jalen Brunson did most of practice. He's listed as questionable. So I'm going to go through these one by one and give you a prediction on when we'll actually see each person. So Jalen Brunson, I think we see him tonight against the Orlando Magic, because I think he is well aware that the Knicks do not want to fall further back in the standings. And even if he is less than 100%, he is likely going to play through it, probably against the advice of the Knicks medical staff, who would like him to rest another day. But we've seen the Knicks already fall 3 times this year to Orlando shorthanded. I think Jalen is probably the difference maker in that matchup, just because the Magic are fantastic defensively. They have a great defensive lead guard in Jalen Suggs. I think Brunson will be the guy to separate the Knicks in that kind of matchup, in I think what would otherwise be like a bloody 92-89 game that Orlando somehow pulls up. So maybe it's a little bit of wishful thinking on my part, but I am going to say, given the fact that he practiced, Jalen Brunson is going to play tonight. OG Anunoby is now taking contact and playing 5-on-5. Tom Thibodeau said he's day-to-day, but he is listed as out for tonight's game against the Magic. I am going to say we get OG Anunoby back maybe a little bit sooner than you think. In fact, I think we get him back substantially sooner than Julius Randle, which I know there were some people holding out hope, not in like a way against OG, but more so in a way that Randle was going to come back quickly, that we would actually see Randle first. I don't think that's going to happen. I think when we see OG back is next week in the second game against the Sixers. That's a little bit optimistic with that 3-week timeline that Ian Begley handed out about a week and a half ago now. But I'm going to say that game for a few reasons. I think it's a really important game with the Knicks currently a game up in the standings over the Sixers. And let's just say the Knicks lose that first one. They're going to want to push OG's timeline up a little bit. But I don't think you see him that first game, because I think, again, same opponent, get him the extra 2 days of rest. And then the really good news is, if there's any kind of minor setback, or if you just want to be really ultra cautious with him, your next game to start that West Coast trip is at Portland. That is a game the Knicks should be able to take care of business without OG. So you could potentially sit him 3 days after and then bring him back the following Friday for a big Knicks game. I believe they played the Nuggets that day. Should I have had the schedule up for this? Absolutely. So they get Portland. Oh, no, the Nuggets are the end of the road trip. That would be against the Kings on Saturday. So he could get 5 days off potentially after that Tuesday game. So that to me is probably the most likely path they go with OG Anunoby. All right, next one. Julius Randle has progressed to light contact. Sounds borderline sensual, from Chris Winfield. My take on Julius Randle. Here's where I'm most pessimistic. I don't think we see Julius before the last 10 games of the season, just because the risk of re-aggravating it is high. I know that Julius is absolutely maniacal. If you listen to Fred Katz on the Knicks Film School podcast, he was talking a lot about how Julius is probably not going to tell the truth with how he's feeling about this injury, and it's kind of like dealing with like a sociopath. Like he is a basketball sociopath. He's going to say and do whatever it takes to convince the Knicks medical staff, the Knicks front office, Tom Thibodeau, who probably doesn't need a lot of convincing, that he is absolutely ready to be back on the court as soon as possible. He's probably advocating for that right now. But to me, the fact that he's only just now taking light contact tells me the Knicks are being extraordinarily cautious with his return. And I think that is the right way to go. And I think they just want to, they want to give him enough time that he can take the hits and adjust to what is inevitably, like if you heard us talk about how Channing Frye described the injury, I'm going to say what is inevitably going to be a really high level of pain. And they want to give him an acclimation period with that. I think probably even more importantly, they want to give him an acclimation period in terms of his conditioning. But also they want to, like, I think this is ultimately, this is a volume thing. And like after Julius accumulates a certain number of hits, the chances of him re-injuring the shoulder or it popping out again are just going to go up and up and up and up over time. I'm not a doctor. That's not scientific. Don't quote me on it. But that after reading and hearing what people have said about this injury, that is my interpretation of how this is ultimately going to work. And I think the less hits Julius can take before the playoffs, where they just have to happen, the better from a Knicks perspective. So I have a feeling we see Julius with around 10 games back in the season. I've referenced the stretch a number of times on this show, but I think it's going to be that stretch starting around Friday, April 5th, where the Knicks get the Bulls. So I guess that's more like the last 6 or 7 games of the year. If you want to start at the other easy stretch and be more optimistic, you could say when they come back from the road trip, March 23rd, March 25th, March 27th, one of those games where they play the Nets, the Pistons, the Raptors, and then the Spurs on the 29th. I guess I'm a little bit more pessimistic last 7 games or so. I think that April 5th game at Chicago is where I would target for Julius. Maybe the truth is somewhere in the middle. The final update was Tom Thibodeau on Mitchell Robinson. This was great. He said, Mitch looks good. He told me to tell everyone that. I loved hearing that, and it's good to know that Mitch is in good spirits. Mitch is a fascinating one because I would almost think that he might be the closest of the group to being able to play tonight. But I think because it's a foot, because it's a lower leg, and because it's Mitchell Robinson, the Knicks are going to be ultra super duper cautious. I have a feeling when he first comes back, we're probably going to see him his first game play something like 12 to 14 minutes, and he will slowly but surely ramp up from there. They could certainly use him with Isaiah Hartenstein at less than 100%. I think we are underestimating, just because it's been such a long time since we've seen him, just how much of a game changer Mitch can be for the Knicks at this point. And then my big question around Mitch coming back is whether the idea that Isaiah Hartenstein with that Achilles is a tendinopathy is likely not going to be quite at 100% for the rest of the year. And that is just going to be an inevitability with Hartenstein. And there's no amount of time that they can rest him that he will get to 100%. And the best you could hope for that he's playing somewhere around 90, maybe to use a Bill Simmonsism and give a very specific percent. 92.7% for Hartenstein is maybe the max there. That being said, I think I'm somewhere in the middle on Mitchell Robinson. I am going to say the Knicks probably get him back March 23rd against the Nets. I think they basically give him this long road trip off. Let him stay in New York. Let him probably play some fives with practice squad players. Maybe he even gets in a G League game if they want to go baseball style. I think they probably don't ultimately do that, but maybe. But I have a feeling he takes off the West Coast trip, returns at home to dominate Nick Claxton and the Nets on March 23rd. The thing I want to get into next is the Knicks rotation when they get OG Anunoby back. And I'm not going to include Mitch and Julius yet because I think, again, those two are going to be a little bit later. But I want to give you guys some reason for optimism with those two, or not with those two, but just in terms of how good the Knicks can be and how just getting OG back could solidify a lot of the areas this team has faltered and has been a little bit weak. And then we're going to finish up, going through some rapid fire positional rankings. I am super duper excited to get to that. So all that next on Locked On Knicks. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventures could be around the next corner? Our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. The 2024 Nissan Rogue is perfect for city drivers and great escapes. Class exclusive Google built-in is your always updating assistant to call on for almost anything. Gone are the days of connecting your phone, Google Assistant, Google Maps, and Google Play Store built right into the 12.3-inch HD touchscreen infotainment system. The 2024 Rogue is the perfect mid-sized crossover for your next adventure. The 2024 Nissan Pathfinder has room for up to 8 and expensive cargo capacity and advanced availability 4x4 capability. With 284 horsepower and up to 6,000 pounds towing, when adventure calls, the Pathfinder is there to answer. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. Alrighty, guys. Let's get into what the Knicks rotation will look like when OG Anunoby comes back for the New York Knicks. And the reason I'm going through this is because I think the Knicks have a chance to, if not getting back to the level of play they showed in January, where they were arguably the best team in basketball, I think they're going to look much, much closer to a top 10 group in the league than what they've currently been playing as, which I would say is probably a slightly below average team since losing OG, all things considered. And the record obviously reflects that. So here's the biggest thing. I am taking Alec Burks out of the rotation with OG Anunoby back. And I'm not putting Shake Milton into the rotation. I'm going to tell you how I'm going to go about that. The point guard spot, I'm going to have Jalen Brunson playing 36 minutes and Deuce McBride playing 12 minutes at the 2. I'm going to have Dante DiVincenzo playing 35 minutes and Deuce McBride 13. So that's 25 minutes per game for Deuce. I just think he's earned it. Like he is pretty clearly these last couple of games been one of the Knicks' 4 best players, like has excelled defensively. Offensively has done a great job in terms of his shot creation. Do I think it's ideal that he's playing point guard? No. Do I think the Knicks should have gone out of the deadline and instead of committing resources to Alec Burks and Bojan Bogdanovic, should they have gone out and gotten a point guard? I am going to say yes to that one. Point here is mostly that Alec Burks has been an unmitigated disaster at the point guard spot. And I'm no longer interested in watching him play the position for the Knicks. And Deuce is not the perfect option, but I think this is the case where you can't let perfect be the enemy of good. And I like the idea of Deuce McBride being out there 25 minutes a game. Small forward, OG Anunoby having 32 minutes. I was thinking of capping him only at like 28 or 30 initially, but that is not the Tao of Tibbs. And I think, again, like the whole point of getting the surgery is that when he came back, he would be 100% back. And I think you just have to roll the die. 32 minutes feels like a reasonable starting point for OG. And I think that will be enough time to basically carry the Knicks defensively in those minutes. And I think you'll hear in a sec how much I'm going to play Bogey. I think you can, that's like an amount of time where you can pair every minute Bogey's on the floor or almost every minute Bogey's on the floor with OG and insulate Bogey in that way. And I think Bogey, who's not been good for the Knicks. The Knicks are minus 12 per 100 possessions with Bogdanovic on the floor. That is a 6th percentile lineup. I think part of the idea was getting him was, yes, to carry the Knicks when Bogey was out. That has failed. That has not worked. But also when you have Anunoby back, that he is such a good defender that you can get the benefits of Bogdanovic's offense without totally taking the defense when they are out there together. So OG Anunoby at 32 minutes, Josh Hart, 16 minutes at the small forward, 16 minutes at the power forward, 32 minutes for Josh Hart total. I know that feels like a pittance given that he is playing minutes over these last 8 games that pretty much no one in the NBA has played over the last decade. I'm going to say he deserves the rest at this point. So 32 total minutes for Josh Hart. The remaining 32 minutes of power forward, 12 minutes for Precious Achiuwa there. 20 minutes for Bogdanovic, but I'm also going to get Precious 18 minutes at center. So he plays 30 minutes total. Bogey plays 20 minutes total. Hartenstein gets the other half hour at center with Precious, again, 18 minutes at the 5, 12 minutes at the 4. I probably should have put a graphic. I'm sorry if you couldn't totally keep up with all that. But I think the lineup of Brunson, Dante, OG, Precious, iHeart is going to work pretty well together. Just because Julius was healthy for most of the time that OG was healthy, there was not a lot of lineup data on that group, but I did find a version of that lineup with Grimes that over just 50 possessions had a plus 62.6 net rating. So I'm going to take a leap here and say it should work pretty well with DiVincenzo, who at this point is better than Quentin Grimes in that lineup, and just having all the shooting that Brunson, Dante, and OG bring to the table, I think mitigates the fact that you don't have a lot of shooting with Precious and iHeart on the floor. I think a version of that lineup with Bogey in there for Precious is pretty fascinating. And Isaiah Hartenstein, 30 minutes a game is a lot right now. You're hoping that, again, that is for about a 4-game stretch, and then you get Mitchell Robinson back, and then you're looking pretty good down the stretch of the season. All right, we're going to wrap this show up with something I like to do every few months or so, and I like to do it when Alex is off the show because it's a fun solo exercise for me, and that is some positional ranking. So we're going to get into that next, where the Knicks rank at every single spot in the NBA, and I think it's going to be a pretty good indicator of why I consider them the NBA's deepest team. If, and this if is doing a lot of work, they can get to 100% health this year. But first, you shouldn't have to worry when you buy tickets to your next big event. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you with killer last-minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. I got an opportunity to use Game Time a couple months back when I was in Phoenix and my New York Knicks were coming to town. I said, "Oh boy, I would love to see them." Let me actually check out this company I talk about all the time in Game Time. It was one of the best experiences I've ever had buying tickets, and that's because of the Game Time guarantee, which means there is no world that when you go on Game Time, you will not be getting the lowest possible price. If you find tickets in the same section or row for less anywhere else, Game Time will credit you for 110% of the difference. The other cool thing was that I got to see the view from my seat before I buy, so I knew exactly what to expect when I arrived. And it was seats that I would normally be like, I don't know, there's a little to the side. Once I saw the view, I was like, you know what? These are actually pretty good. The other thing I loved was that all-in prices showed me the total up front. So I knew I was getting a great deal right off the bat, and I didn't get any nasty surprises at the end. It was also super quick. You can buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. So take the guesswork into buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. You can create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Hey, what's up, guys? We're going to wrap things up, as mentioned, with positional rankings. All right. Basically, go through every spot, every position, where the Knicks rank in the NBA in that position. And I'm doing this to make the case that the Knicks are, in fact, the deepest team in basketball. And if you think healthy is doing too much work, because as I'll note in the power forward section, like you're really counting on Julius Randle being 100% healthy to have the Knicks super high in that category, because there are a lot of great candidates. So maybe that's doing a little bit too much work for this season, but if it ultimately doesn't happen this year, which would suck, you can look at them as one of the healthiest teams in the NBA for next season. All right, so at the point guard spot, this is right now the depth chart there is Jalen Brunson, Deuce McBride. They would have gotten a bump in the past for every minute that Jalen Brunson is not on the floor. The fact that they have Emmanuel quickly on the floor. And for all of these, I'm giving disproportionate weight to starters. Starters are probably worth like 85% of the ranking, I'm going to say, just because come playoff time, it is the starters playing 85% of the minutes, generally, depending on the team. But at point guard, I have the Knicks at 5th. I have OKC at 1. You know what? I'm gonna change this on the fly just because I guess Kyrie is technically the backup point guard for Dallas. I think you have to have Dallas at 1 since Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving are playing all of their point guard minutes. So I'd go Dallas. I go Oklahoma City just because of Shea, and I guess Giddey is the point guard when he's not off the floor. That's pretty great. The Suns are next, even though they don't really have a backup point guard. That is just how good Devin Booker is. And yes, you can go to clean the glass. He has been a point guard this season, even if historically he will go down as a shooting guard. And then fourth, Golden State, the weight of Steph Curry there. The teams just behind the Knicks and ones that have like a good case for maybe being ahead of them. The Pacers, Halliburton, I think I'm weighing him down a little bit for the cold stretch he's had of late. There's certainly an argument to be made that he is a better player right now than Jalen Brunson. On Locked On Knicks, I'm not going to be the one to make that case. And Andrew Nembhard is probably a slightly better player than Deuce McBride, though that's a fascinating conversation because I think Deuce is pretty clearly a better scorer, pretty clearly a better shooter, but Nembhard is much better at initiating offense. So you want to put the Pacers ahead of the Knicks, that's fine. If you want to have the Nuggets ahead of the Knicks, I think it's fair to make that argument just because Jamal Murray got it done in NBA Finals. Reggie Jackson, at this point, not defensively, but arguably overall is a better backup point guard than Deuce McBride. Is just because of what he brings to the table in terms of initiating offense. I will hear you out on that one. There are other teams like the Kings with De'Aaron Fox, and their bench is pretty good at the guard spot. Could be in the mix. I'm going to have the Knicks at 5 because I love Jalen Brunson, and I think it's a reasonable argument given that he has been one of the 10 best offensive players in basketball this year. Shooting guard. This is one where I have the Knicks higher than I ever would have imagined I had them going into the season. If I did have them this high, I would have thought it was because Quentin Grimes basically turned into Desmond Bane. Instead, it's Dante DiVincenzo being poor man's Steph Curry this entire year. I have the Minnesota Timberwolves at 1 with Anthony Edwards, Cleveland, Donovan Mitchell, number 2, Mavs at 3rd. That one's close. I'm not the biggest Kyrie Irving fan, even just purely as a player, but I just think it's hard to justify putting some of the other guys ahead of him just because they are not the fulcrums that he is. The Grizzlies with Desmond Bane, 4th. Boston with, I guess Drew Holiday is probably their nominal 2 guard, 5th, and there's a good case you could put him ahead of Bane. Hawks and DeJounte Murray, 6th. Suns with Bradley Beal, 7th. And that one, honestly, I think this is insane to say. I think there's an argument to be made that on a per minute basis, Dante DiVincenzo has, or actually, a per minute basis would be unfair to say. I'm going to say in the aggregate, when you take into account how much they played, that DiVincenzo has been a better player than Bradley Beal this year. But if I'm going to project full health, I also have to project full health for Beal, who's been a little bit disappointing. But Grayson Allen's been an excellent fill-in at that spot. So I'm going to have the Suns slightly ahead. The Heat with Tyler Hero. I just have not seen the evidence that Tyler Hero, for all of his production, for all of his efficiency, for the fact that he's undoubtedly a very, very good offensive player. I would say undoubtedly a better overall offensive player than Dante DiVincenzo is. I have just not seen him impact winning in a significant way. The Heat seem to be no different when he's on the court, when he is off the court. So I am going to put the Knicks just ahead of the Heat. So just to review so far, Knicks 5th at point guard, 8th at 2 guard. Small forward, Miami and Jimmy Butler have to be 1. The Celtics, Jaylen Brown are 2. LAC, Paul George, 3. OKC, Jalen Williams, 4. I'm super high on Jalen Williams. I think he is incredible. The Pistons and Cade Cunningham at 5. I know he's not had his most efficient year. The Pistons obviously suck. But I'm still a big believer in him. The Nets and Mikal Bridges at 7. This is almost the first spot I considered slotting OG Anunoby and the Knicks, just because Anunoby made such an extraordinary impact on the Knicks. I mentioned that stat early in the year, that the Knicks' top 8 2-man lineups, OG was a part of all 8 of them. It was just so transformative for this team. Like I almost think you can make a case for slotting him in there and maybe even ahead of Cade just for this season. And like, I'm here to hear that argument. I just think Bridges is a more versatile offensive weapon, and it's not quite the defender that OG is, but it's just a few notches down. And then the last team I had ahead of OG in the Knicks was Brandon Ingram and the Pelicans. They have a ton of depth at that spot. Honestly, with Trey Murphy, like getting the backup small forward minutes or a decent chunk of them. I know he plays some 4-2. You could probably move New Orleans like up to 4th or 5th, and I wouldn't have any issue with that. I'm just not the biggest Brandon Ingram guy in the world. I think sometimes his scoring is not to the detriment of his team, but it is, and he's a good passer, but he does not play the most like it's sometimes hard to blend him in, I guess would be the best way for me to frame it. I have the Knicks next. I think the Magic with Franz Wagner are close. I think the Bulls with DeMar DeRozan are close. But OG Anunoby, I think with the impact he's had on the Knicks, it would be just hard to put him any lower than that. Power forward. This is where things get interesting. I have the Bucks and Giannis at first. No argument there. Celtics and Jason Tatum at second. Clippers and Kawhi Leonard at fourth. LeBron and the Lakers at fifth. Clippers and Kawhi Leonard at third. LeBron and the Lakers at fourth. Kevin Durant and the Suns at fifth. I think Giannis is undoubtedly the top guy out of that group. You can talk me into, come playoff time, pretty much any order 2 through 5. I just think Tatum is the youngest and most reliable option at this point, even if he has maybe the lowest ceiling of that group. Probably has a slightly higher ceiling than KD at this point. And then Kawhi's two-way impact still puts him third for me. LeBron just still a better creator than KD. I've not, as a Suns guy, I think KD has undoubtedly fallen off from his Brooklyn peak a few years ago, while still being probably a top 10 to 12 player on the planet. And then just getting him. Well, I'm not even going to say these guys are ahead of the Knicks. What I did here was I have about like 4 teams that are all in the Julius Randle range. So I have the Magic with Paolo, the Wolves with Karl Anthony Towns, even though he's hurt right now, the Grizzlies with Triple J, and the Jazz with Lauri Markkanen, I think are all in about the same range with Randle. I decided sort of arbitrarily to just put Randle in second. If you put a gun to my head to ask which of that group I would take over him this year, it would probably be Paolo, just because he's a better shooter while bringing a lot of the same stuff to the table. And is undoubtedly, maybe not undoubtedly, but I would say pretty clearly a better defensive player than Julius is. I just think Julius's physicality is so core to the Knicks' identity that maybe there's a little bias there, but I just think he sets the tone in so many ways, and is just such a good rebounder. Catch shooting would obviously be revolutionary in the Knicks, and is revolutionary, and probably like for the Timberwolves, like I don't think there's any world where they would take Julius over Cat, just because they need the shooting more than they need Julius's bully ball driving. The Grizz, Jaren Jackson Jr., world's better defender than Julius, one of the best defenders on planet Earth. Not as reliable offensively, marketing, offensive fulcrum, hyper efficient. You want to say he's better than Julius, I'll hear you out. I just don't think he does it in games that matter as much as Julius's games do, just because the Knicks are better and every game has a little bit more weight to it. So in the aggregate, I put Julius second out of that group. That would leave the Knicks seventh in my power forward rankings. Center is surprisingly, because I think that is quote unquote the Knicks' deepest spot, and that they have a great starter there and a great backup there. But I have the Knicks all the way down at 12th, just because there are so many teams with starters that are just far better than Mitchell Robinson or Isaiah Hartenstein. Nuggets, Jokic, Sixers, Embiid, Lakers, AD, Celtics, KP, Miami with Bam. I would have had him higher after last year's playoffs. He's had a really disappointing regular season offensively. The Spurs with Wemby, maybe a little bit high, but he has just been a world changer. Like you look at it's 5 blocks, 6 blocks, 5 blocks, 6 blocks with them. The Thunder with Chet, guy who can protect the rim, guy who could space the floor, and pump and go, like incredibly versatile weapon. The Wolves with Gobert, still probably the best defensive player in basketball. That honestly is maybe too low for them. I just think the playoffs, his utility goes down a little bit. The Kings is probably a bit disrespectful to Domantas Sabonis. I don't really think his game totally translates to playoff basketball. The Rockets with Şengün, he's been awesome this year. He's fallen off a tiny bit of late. And then the Cavs with Jared Allen. That is my most controversial one to me. The difference there is having Jared Allen and Evan Mobley. Yes, Mitchell Robinson kicked their butts. I wanted to say a different word there. Last year's playoffs, like totally dominated them, took away their manhood, however you want to frame it. I think the Knicks in a direct matchup with the Cavs get the better of that matchup. That being said, would the Knicks possibly be a better team on a night-to-night basis with Jared Allen and Evan Mobley in their starting lineup than they would with Mitchell Robinson and Isaiah Hartenstein? I think it's hard to argue they wouldn't. It would hurt their rebounding a little bit, but Allen is just such a better offensive player than those guys. I ultimately went that direction. Skewer me if you want. I understand if you want to put the Knicks ahead of the Cavs. So just to summarize, the Knicks, I have them at 5th in my point guard rankings, 8th in my 2-guard rankings, 8th in my small forward rankings, 7th in my power forward rankings, 12th in my center rankings, top 12 at every single position, top 10 at 4 different positions. Not necessarily elite in the sense of being top 5 anywhere other than point guard, but I'm going to call that a day and say the Knicks are quite possibly the deepest team in the NBA. So that is it for this edition of Locked On Knicks. We will be back with you tonight, recapping their hopeful win over the Magic, hopefully with Jalen Brunson back looking 100%. But until then, I'm Gavin Schall, and I'll talk to you very, very soon on Locked On Knicks.